Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with AfroTales 38. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments section, and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. Nina sat across from Tunde at a quiet corner table in the restaurant. The soft music, the warm lighting, and the flickering candles gave the evening a romantic feel. It was their favorite place, where they had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and the day he proposed. She smiled softly, thinking maybe tonight was a night they would finally talk about trying again. About hope. About love. Tunde, however, looked tense. He avoided her eyes and barely touched the plate of food in front of him. Nina noticed how he kept checking his wristwatch, as if he wanted the evening to be over before it even began. "Is everything okay?" she asked, breaking the silence between them. He cleared his throat, still not meeting her gaze. "Nina, there's something I need to talk to you about." Her heart skipped a beat. The serious tone in his voice made her uneasy. She set her fork down and looked at him with concern. "What is it?" Tunde reached into his jacket pocket and placed a brown envelope on the table. Nina stared at it, confused. "What's this?" she asked quietly. His eyes finally met hers. "It's from my lawyer," he said. "I'm filing for divorce." For a few seconds, Nina didn't understand. The word divorce echoed in her head, but it didn't make sense. She looked at the envelope, then back at him. "A divorce?" she whispered. You want to leave me?" Tunde nodded slowly. "I think it's the best thing for both of us." Nina's chest tightened. Her breath caught in her throat. "But why? We've been through so much together. We promised to keep trying." "I'm tired, Nina," Tunde said flatly. "We've tried for 5 years. The treatments, the doctor visits, the endless tests. It's not working. I need to move on." She shook her head, blinking back the tears forming in her eyes. "So that's it? You just give up? On me? On us?" "I'm not the only one who's tired," he replied, voice growing cold. "You're always sad, always blaming yourself. This isn't a marriage anymore. It's a struggle, and I can't carry it anymore." Nina looked around the restaurant. People were laughing, smiling, celebrating. Meanwhile, her world was falling apart right there, in a place filled with memories of love. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why now, why here. But all she could do was whisper. Was it the child, or lack of one? Tunde didn't answer right away. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "It's everything, Nina. But yes, not having a child is a part of it. My family keeps asking. My friends wonder. People talk." "So you care more about what they think than what I feel," she said, her voice rising slightly. "No," he said firmly, "but I care about my future. I want a family, and it's not happening with us." Nina stared at him, her heart breaking piece by piece. The man she loved, the man she fought with through the darkest times, was giving up, and he was blaming her body for it. She remembered the injections, the medication, the sleepless nights crying into her pillow. She remembered every moment when the doctor said not yet, try again, or worse, it may never happen. And now, after all of that, Tunde wanted to walk away. "I thought love meant staying," she said softly, "even when it's hard." "I thought so too," he said, "but sometimes staying hurts more." Nina looked down at the envelope. Divorce. Just like that. No warning. No last conversation. No final attempt to fix what was broken. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. He hesitated. "A few months." "A few months." Her eyes widened. "And you didn't say anything? You let me believe we were still trying." "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "Well, you failed," she snapped, her voice trembling. Tunde sighed again and stood up, placing some cash on the table. "I'll give you time to think, but the papers are signed from my end. Just read them." And with that, he walked out, leaving her alone at the table. Nina sat frozen for a long time. She didn't touch the envelope. She didn't move. She just sat there, letting the tears fall freely down her cheeks. Her dream of becoming a mother, of raising a child with a man she loved, had been shattered in one evening. All the hope she carried, the hope that maybe they'd try adoption, or another treatment, or even just accept their life as it was gone. The waiter came by and asked if she needed anything. She shook her head, smiled weakly, and waved him away. She couldn't speak. Later that night, Nina walked home slowly. The cool air hit her face, drying the tears that hadn't stopped flowing since the restaurant. When she entered the apartment, everything looked the same, but it felt different, empty. She sat on the bed, holding the envelope in her hands. She still didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what was inside, an end, a full stop to the life she had imagined. And as she stared at the white ceiling, she wondered how to move forward, how to survive the loss of a dream that had been so tightly woven into her soul. But she didn't know the answer. Not yet. All she knew was that everything had changed. The next morning, Nina woke up in her quiet apartment. The spot next to her in bed was already cold. It wasn't the first time she had woken up alone. Tunde had been distant for months. Still, now that she knew he was leaving her, the emptiness felt heavier. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the divorce papers she had placed on the nightstand. The words still didn't feel real. She moved through the morning like a robot. Shower, clothes, breakfast. She barely touched the toast. Her stomach turned just thinking about eating. When she stepped outside her flat, the sun was bright. The street was already alive. Neighbors swept their front steps. Children ran down the road in school uniforms, laughing and shouting. Life moved on, even though hers felt like it had stopped. As she locked the gate behind her, she heard a familiar voice. Auntie Nina. Good morning, oh. It was Mama Ireti, the elderly woman next door. Nina forced a smile. Good morning, Ma. Mama Ireti walked closer, leaning on her cane. Her eyes were kind but sharp. We haven't seen you and your husband in a while. I hope all is well. Nina's smile froze. Yes, we're fine. Just busy. Mama Ireti nodded slowly. You people should not waste time, oh. You know children are a blessing. You've been married for how many years now? Nina's heart sank. She gave a small nod, not trusting herself to speak. Don't mind me, Mama Ireti continued. It's just advice. You're a good girl. I've been praying for you. You know people talk, but God has a final say. Nina managed a quiet thank you before walking quickly toward the main road. Her chest was tight, and her eyes stung. People talk. That's what she hated most. Everyone had something to say. Everyone had an opinion. She boarded a bus and sat quietly at the window. As they drove through the streets, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her cousin. Nina, Auntie was asking again, oh. She said she's praying for fruitfulness in your marriage. I didn't know what to tell her. Maybe you should visit. Nina closed the chat and sighed. Another reminder. Another whisper from someone who didn't know what she had been through. They didn't know about the injections, the tears, the hospital visits, the night she cried alone while Tunde watched TV in silence. At work, she tried to stay focused. She answered emails, filed documents, and attended a meeting. Her colleague Amaka, a newlywed, sat beside her during lunch. My husband and I are already thinking of baby names, Amaka said, smiling brightly. He wants twins. Imagine that. Nina smiled politely. That's nice. Amaka looked at her curiously. You and Tunde have been married how long now? 5 years, Nina said quietly. Wow. And no kids yet. Nina looked away. Not yet. Amaka reached across the table and touched her hand. Don't worry. God's time is the best. Just keep praying. Nina nodded, but inside, she felt like screaming. She had prayed. She had cried. She had waited. She had done everything. Yet, she was still the woman people pitied or whispered about. After work, she scrolled through social media on the bus ride home. Pictures of baby showers, pregnancy announcements, and family portraits filled her feed. Every smile felt like a reminder of what she didn't have. One post caught her eye. So blessed to be a mom of 3 in 3 years. God is so faithful. Nina liked the post out of habit, but her heart ached. She wasn't jealous, just tired. Tired of feeling like she wasn't enough. Tired of pretending not to care. When she got home, she didn't turn on the lights. She sat in the living room, staring into the dark. Her phone lit up again, this time a family group chat. Her aunt had posted a Bible verse about children being a gift from the Lord. Nina sighed and dropped the phone. Later that night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth. Her reflection looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, a blank expression. She leaned closer, whispering to herself, "I'm more than this." She didn't fully believe it yet, but saying it helped, just a little. As she prepared for bed, a memory floated into her mind. Her wedding day. Her mother had hugged her tightly and whispered, "Now you will give us grandchildren." At the time, it had felt like a sweet blessing. Now it felt like a curse wrapped in good intentions. That night, she lay in bed, eyes wide open, listening to the ticking clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time passing. Years wasted, some would say. But Nina began to wonder, what if her worth wasn't tied to a child or a man? What if she could define her life by something else? The thought scared her, but it also gave her a tiny spark of hope. The world had many expectations for her. Be a wife, be a mother, be quiet, be grateful. But maybe, just maybe, she could start choosing her own path. The days after the dinner were long and painful for Nina. She went to work, came back home, cooked a little, and slept a lot. Her world had gone quiet. The apartment felt bigger, colder, like it knew someone had left. The divorce papers were still lying on the table, untouched. Nina didn't want to talk to anyone. She didn't return calls. She ignored messages. Even her best friend Zita's visits went unanswered. She just wanted to be alone. Alone with her thoughts, her pain, and her broken dreams. She stayed in bed most days, staring at the ceiling. Everything felt meaningless. The love she had worked hard to protect was gone. The family she dreamed of, also gone. But then, something strange began to happen. She started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, she thought it was just stress. Her stomach would twist and turn. The smell of food made her feel dizzy. She would lie down, close her eyes, and wait for it to pass. But it didn't. Then came the tiredness. Her body felt heavy. Her back ached. Even a short walk to the store made her breathless. One morning, after rushing to the bathroom to throw up again, Nina sat on the floor, holding her head. "This can't just be stress," she whispered. She tried to count the days since her last period, but her mind was foggy. Everything had been a blur since the divorce dinner. Still, the thought crept in. Could it be? Nina didn't want to hope. She had hoped before and been disappointed too many times. But something inside her told her to check. That afternoon, she put on a loose dress, tied a scarf around her head, and walked slowly to the nearest pharmacy. She avoided eye contact with the pharmacist as she asked for a pregnancy test. "Do you want one or two?" The woman behind the counter asked with a small smile. "One," Nina replied quickly, avoiding questions. Back at home, she sat on the bathroom floor, holding the test in her shaking hand. She stared at the small stick, too afraid to use it. Finally, she stood up and followed the instructions. Then came the longest 5 minutes of her life. She placed the test on the sink and walked out of the bathroom, pacing the living room. Her heart was racing. Her thoughts were spinning. What if it's positive? What if it's not? Am I ready for either answer? When the time was up, she returned to the bathroom and picked up the stick. 2 lines. Positive. Nina stared at it, her mouth slightly open. Her hands began to tremble. She sat down on the edge of the bathtub, unable to move. She was pregnant. Pregnant. Tears ran down her cheeks, but they were not like the ones she had cried before. These tears were a mix of shock, confusion, and something else, something warm and strange. Was it joy? She touched her belly slowly, not quite believing it. "Is this real?" she whispered. 4 years, she had prayed for this, waited, tried, failed, and now, just when everything was falling apart, here it was, life. A part of her wanted to call Tunde, to tell him, to shout the news. But then she remembered his words. "I'm tired. I want something different. I've already signed the papers." She held the test close to her chest and began to cry, this time letting it all out. The pain, the loneliness, the joy, the fear. Later that night, Nina sat by the window, a warm blanket around her shoulders. The city lights blinked in the distance, and the night air was calm. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could do this alone. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. She thought about the tiny life growing inside her, a heartbeat she couldn't hear yet, a face she couldn't see, but already she felt connected. "I'm going to protect you," she whispered to her belly. "Even if it's just me, I'll give you everything I have." The next morning, Nina called her friend Zita. "Hello." Zita answered quickly. "Nina, thank God. I've been so worried." "I'm pregnant," Nina said softly, cutting her off. There was silence on the line. Then Zita whispered, "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Oh my God." "Nina, that's... wow. Are you okay?" "I don't know," Nina replied honestly. "I'm scared, but I also feel strong. I don't know how, but I do." "I'm coming over," Zita said immediately. When Zita arrived, she hugged Nina tightly. "You're not alone. You hear me? We're going to figure this out. One day at a time." Nina nodded, tears in her eyes. One day at a time. That evening, Nina took out a small notebook she hadn't used in years. She began writing. Not plans, not goals, just feelings, words, thoughts, dreams, for herself, for her baby. She didn't know if she was ready, but she was willing to try. She didn't know what her next steps would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer broken. She was becoming something new. Someone new. Zita arrived at Nina's apartment with a bag of groceries and a big smile. She didn't ask if she could come. She just came. That was how their friendship worked. They had been best friends since university. Over the years, they had celebrated birthdays, cried over heartbreaks, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. Now, Zita was here for something more serious. She had never seen Nina this quiet, this lost. Nina opened the door slowly, her eyes tired but soft. "I brought food," Zita said gently, lifting the bag. "You need to eat, and talk, and cry if you want." Nina nodded and stepped aside. "Thank you." Inside the apartment, Zita moved around like it was her second home. She went straight to the kitchen, unpacked the groceries, and started making tea. "You always know what I need before I say anything," Nina said with a small smile. Zita turned and grinned. "That's because you don't hide things well. You've always had an open book for a face." They sat on the couch, sipping tea. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind that only true friends shared. "So," Zita said softly, "you're really pregnant?" Nina nodded. "I did the test twice. Same result." "And Tunde doesn't know?" "No, I don't think I'll tell him. He made his choice. He wants a different life." Zita frowned. That man has no idea what he's walking away from. Nina shrugged. "It still hurts, though." "I know it does," Zita said, reaching out to hold her hand. "But you're strong, Nina. Stronger than you think." Nina looked down. "I don't feel strong. I feel scared. Alone." "You're not alone," Zita said firmly. "You have me. Always." Nina smiled through tears. "Always. Always." They sat like that for a while, hand in hand, no more words needed. Later, as Zita made lunch, Nina rested on the couch. She watched her friend move about the kitchen with ease, humming a soft tune. It brought her comfort, this simple act of care. "You've always taken care of me," Nina said, her voice soft. "Of course," Zita replied. "That's what sisters do." Nina thought back to when they first met in school. Zita had been the loud one, the confident one. Nina had been quiet and unsure. But Zita had pulled her into her world, and they had never looked back. Zita came out of the kitchen with 2 plates of rice and stew. "Eats everything," she said playfully. "You're eating for 2 now." Nina laughed a little. "That still sounds strange." "It'll feel real soon. Trust me." As they ate, Zita listened carefully while Nina talked about her feelings, her confusion, her fear, her anger toward Tunde. Zita didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix anything. She just listened. After lunch, they sat by the window, watching people pass by. The sky had turned gray, and light rain began to fall. "It's like the sky is crying with me," Nina said. "Maybe," Zita replied, "but rain also makes things grow. It washes things clean." Nina thought about that. Maybe her life was being washed clean too. Painful as it was, maybe this was the start of something new. "You're going to be an amazing mother," Zita said suddenly. Nina turned to her. "You think so?" "I know so. You're kind, patient, strong. This baby is already lucky to have you." Nina wiped her eyes. "I don't even know where to start." "One step at a time," Zita said. "First, let's go see a doctor. Confirm everything. Check how far along you are." "I haven't been yet," Nina admitted. "I was too scared." "I'll go with you," Zita said immediately. "You don't have to do any of this alone." Nina nodded slowly. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe she could do this. With Zita by her side, maybe she wouldn't fall apart. That weekend, they went to the hospital together. Nina sat nervously in the waiting room, her hands shaking. Zita held them, whispering encouraging words. When the doctor confirmed the pregnancy and showed them the tiny heartbeat on the screen, Nina burst into tears. Zita cried too, holding her close. "It's real," Nina whispered. "It's really happening." "Welcome to the beginning of your new life," Zita said with a smile. On the way home, they stopped at a small baby store. Nina picked up a tiny white Honesty and smiled. "I still can't believe this," she said. "Believe it," Zita said, "and get used to it. There's a whole new adventure waiting for you." That night, back at home, Nina stood in front of the mirror, holding the little baby outfit against her stomach. Her reflection looked different now. Still tired, still emotional, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked at Zita, who was already in her pajamas, lounging on the couch. "Thank you," Nina said, "for being here, for not letting me drown." Zita smiled. "That's what friends are for. You did the same for me when I went through my heartbreak." "This is different," Nina said. "Pain is pain. But healing comes faster when someone holds your hand." Nina walked over and sat beside her. "You've always been my safe place. And you've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for." Nina nodded. "I think I'm starting to believe that now." As the rain outside turned into a soft drizzle, the two friends sat in peaceful silence. Nina no longer felt completely broken. Yes, her heart still hurt. But with Zita's support, she was slowly putting the pieces back together. She was no longer alone. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she would be okay. The days slowly began to feel different for Nina. Her mornings were still quiet. Her apartment still held the silence of Tunde's absence. But something inside her had changed. The baby growing in her womb reminded her every day that life was moving forward, whether she was ready or not. Zita still visited often, helping Nina with doctor's appointments and meals. But Nina was learning to stand on her own again. One morning, as she stood in front of her wardrobe, she opened the top shelf and pulled out a small box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were old sketches, colored pencils, scraps of cloth, and a small sewing kit. It had been a long time since she last drew anything. Before marriage, before the fertility treatments, Nina used to love designing clothes. It made her feel alive and creative. But she had let it go when life became too heavy. She sat at the table, picked up a pencil, and began to draw. Her hands moved slowly at first, unsure and rusty. But soon, shapes began to form on the paper. She sketched tiny shirts, soft harnesses, little hats with stars on them. She imagined dressing her baby in each piece. For the first time in weeks, she smiled with real joy. The next day, Nina visited the market. She bought a few pieces of soft cotton fabric, yellow, white, and sky blue. They were cheap and simple, but to her, they were full of possibility. At home, she set up a small corner of her living room with her materials. She borrowed an old sewing machine from a neighbor and began working. She wasn't fast, and her stitches weren't perfect. But every thread she pulled, every piece she cut, felt like she was sewing her heart back together. Each piece of baby clothing she made reminded her that she was more than a woman who had been left, more than someone who struggled to conceive. She was an artist, a creator, a woman with dreams. Zita came over one evening and found her surrounded by fabric. "Nina," she laughed, "what is all this?" Nina looked up, beaming. "I'm making baby clothes." Zita picked up a tiny cap with small stars. "This is so cute. You made this." "Yes," Nina said proudly. "I used to design clothes a long time ago. I forgot how much I loved it." Zita nodded. "You didn't forget. You just paused. But I'm glad you're doing it again." They sat together on the floor, looking through Nina's sketches. "You could sell these," Zita said suddenly. "Other moms would love this kind of handmade clothing." "Sell them?" Nina asked, surprised. "Who would buy from me?" "Don't talk like that," Zita said firmly. "You have talent, and people love things made with care. You could start small, just a few pieces online or at a weekend market." Nina looked around the room. Her creations were simple, but each one carried a piece of her heart. "Maybe I could," she said slowly. "It would help with money, too." Zita grinned. "Exactly. And more than that, it's yours. Something that belongs to you." Over the next few weeks, Nina worked every day. Her baby bump began to show, and she would rub it gently as she sewed. The baby clothes grew more beautiful, colorful patterns, tiny bows, soft lace. She felt connected not just to her unborn child, but also to herself. She chose a name for her project, Little Light, because that's what her baby was, a light in the darkness. Zita helped her take pictures of the clothes and create a small page on social media. They posted photos, shared a few words about Nina's story, without too much detail, and waited. At first, nothing happened. But then, one day, Nina got a message. "Hi, I love your work. Can I order a newborn set for my sister?" Nina stared at the message in shock. Her hands shook as she typed a reply. Soon, more messages came in. People like her style. They asked for custom colors. They shared her page with others. Slowly, orders started to come. Nina packaged each item carefully, writing little thank you notes and tying the bundles with ribbon. She delivered some by hand. Others she sent through delivery riders. One afternoon, as she folded another set of harnesses, Nina looked around her apartment. It wasn't just a place of sadness anymore. It was her workspace, her studio, her sanctuary. She felt proud. When her belly grew bigger, she rested more but never stopped sketching. She kept a journal, too, writing letters to her baby, notes about her day, and even small dreams she had for their future. "You gave me a reason to rise again," she wrote in one letter. "Even before I've held you, you've helped me find myself." One night, as she and Zita sat sipping warm tea, Zita looked at her and said, "You're glowing." Nina laughed. "Is it the pregnancy or the business?" "Both," Zita said. "You've come alive again." "I didn't think I could," Nina admitted. "After the divorce, I felt like I lost everything." "But you didn't," Zita said softly. "You just found something new. Something even more beautiful." Nina looked down at her hands, strong, steady, covered in thread. She had been broken, yes, but now she was building again. A new life, a new future. Not just for her baby, but for herself. Nina woke up early. The sun was just rising, and the light gently filled the room. Her baby bump was getting heavier, but she smiled as she stretched. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "Good morning, little one." After brushing her teeth and drinking a cup of warm tea, Nina went straight to her small work corner in the living room. Her table was full of fabrics, threads, scissors, and sketches. The room had changed so much in the past few weeks. It no longer looked like a sad, quiet apartment. It looked like a place full of purpose. Her business, Little Light, was growing little by little. She had made a few sales through her social media page. Friends shared her work. Some people even sent her encouraging messages. But things were not always easy. One day, she went to the fabric market to buy more materials. It was a hot and crowded day. People pushed past her, sellers shouted prices, and the smell of sweat and fried food filled the air. She held her belly gently as she moved through the crowd. "Madam, the price has gone up," the fabric seller told her. "This cotton is now 1,200 naira per yard." "But last week it was 900, Nina said. "Everything has gone up. You want quality or not?" Nina sighed and handed over the money. She couldn't argue. She needed the material. Still, moments like this made her doubt herself. Back at home, she worked on a customer's order, a set of harnesses and a matching baby cap. Halfway through sewing, the needle on her machine broke. She checked her toolbox, but she didn't have a spare. She sat back, frustrated. "I can't afford delays," she muttered. She took a deep breath and picked up her phone. She called a nearby tailor shop and asked if they had spare machine needles. "Yes," the woman said, "but come before 6 p.m. Nina quickly changed and rushed out. It wasn't easy to move fast with her growing belly, but she didn't want to disappoint her customer. That night, after fixing the machine and completing the order, she lay in bed, exhausted. "This is hard," she whispered, "but I won't stop." She knew she couldn't afford to stop. Her baby needed her to be strong. She needed to be strong for herself, too. Some days were better. A popular mom blogger reposted her work, and suddenly her phone was full of new messages and orders. "I want a custom baby dress." "Do you have newborn gift sets?" "Can you make matching mother and baby outfits?" Nina was happy but overwhelmed. She wasn't used to handling so many orders. She had to write down each request, reply politely, take payments, sew the clothes, and package them, all on her own. She stayed up late sewing, sometimes until midnight. Her fingers ached, her back hurt, and her eyes burned from staring at fabric and threads for so long. But each time she saw a finished product, neatly folded and ready to be delivered, she felt proud. She was doing this. Slowly, step by step, she was building something real. One weekend, Zita came over and found her surrounded by cloth. "Nina, you need help," Zita said, hands on her hips. "I know," Nina replied, "but I can't pay anyone yet." "Then let me help, just for now." Together, they created a better system. Zita helped organize orders, made a simple spreadsheet to track payments, and even handled some customer chats online. "You're amazing," Nina told her. Zita smiled. "We're in this together." Another challenge came with delivery. Some customers were far away, and delivery riders sometimes got addresses wrong or arrived late. Nina had to learn how to speak firmly but politely with them. She had to make sure each customer felt important. There were also days when sales slowed. No new orders, no messages. Nina would sit quietly, wondering, is this really working? What if it all stops? But then she would remember her why. She would touch her belly and say, "We're doing this for us." One bright morning, she was invited to a small weekend market for mothers and babies. She almost said no. She felt nervous about going out to sell in public. "What if no one buys anything?" she asked Zita. "Then you still went. You still showed up. And that's brave." Nina packed a small bag with her best items, printed a few flyers, and went to the event. She wore a simple dress and a big smile. At the market, she set up her table and laid out her baby clothes neatly. As mothers walked by, some stopped to look. "These are handmade?" one woman asked. "Yes," Nina replied. "Made with love." By the end of the day, she had sold 7 items. It wasn't a huge amount, but to Nina, it felt like winning a gold medal. That evening, she sat on her floor, counting her money and smiling. She had done it. She had faced her fears and taken a big step forward. More markets followed, more messages, more small victories. There were still hard days, days when orders delayed or she felt too tired to sew. But each time, she pushed through, because this wasn't just about baby clothes. It was about freedom, about healing, about becoming the woman she was always meant to be. Nina was happy but overwhelmed. She wasn't used to handling so many orders. She had to write down each request, reply politely, take payments, sew the clothes, and package them, all on her own. She stayed up late sewing, sometimes until midnight. Her fingers ached, her back hurt, and her eyes burned from staring at fabric and threads for so long. But each time she saw a finished product, neatly folded and ready to be delivered, she felt proud. She was doing this. Slowly, step by step, she was building something real. One weekend, Zita came over and found her surrounded by cloth. "Nina, you need help," Zita said, hands on her hips. "I know," Nina replied, "but I can't pay anyone yet." "Then let me help, just for now." Together, they created a better system. Zita helped organize orders, made a simple spreadsheet to track payments, and even handled some customer chats online. "You're amazing," Nina told her. Zita smiled. "We're in this together." Another challenge came with delivery. Some customers were far away, and delivery riders sometimes got addresses wrong or arrived late. Nina had to learn how to speak firmly but politely with them. She had to make sure each customer felt important. There were also days when sales slowed. No new orders, no messages. Nina would sit quietly, wondering, is this really working? What if it all stops? But then she would remember her why. She would touch her belly and say, "We're doing this for us." One bright morning, she was invited to a small weekend market for mothers and babies. She almost said no. She felt nervous about going out to sell in public. "What if no one buys anything?" she asked Zita. "Then you still went. You still showed up. And that's brave." Nina packed a small bag with her best items, printed a few flyers, and went to the event. She wore a simple dress and a big smile. At the market, she set up her table and laid out her baby clothes neatly. As mothers walked by, some stopped to look. "These are handmade?" one woman asked. "Yes," Nina replied. "Made with love." By the end of the day, she had sold 7 items. It wasn't a huge amount, but to Nina, it felt like winning a gold medal. That evening, she sat on her floor, counting her money and smiling. She had done it. She had faced her fears and taken a big step forward. More markets followed, more messages, more small victories. There were still hard days, days when orders delayed or she felt too tired to sew. But each time, she pushed through, because this wasn't just about baby clothes. It was about freedom, about healing, about becoming the woman she was always meant to be.